Hi, I'm Aileen. My family used to introduce me as the one who fixes printers at board dinners, charity galas, even my own brother's engagement party. They rewrote my life as a hobby, erased me from their stories, and handed my legacy to someone else. But what if I told you they also used my work to build a company now worth over $200 million? And for years, no one knew it had my name on it. Worse than the silence was how carefully they made me believe I was lucky just to be in the room. Why did they fight so hard to keep me small? And what happens when the woman they buried refuses to stay quiet? When I stepped into the restaurant, the first thing that hit me wasn't the scent of seared steak or the clink of crystal. It was the glaring absence of my name on the welcome banner. Happy 68th, Dr. Russell Whitfield, it read in a deep gold serif font. Below it, hosted by Darlene and Lyle Whitfield. That was it. I paused at the entrance, my black dress suddenly feeling too tailored, too intentional. A hostess smiled and gestured toward the private dining area, but I lingered for a second. My name wasn't there, not even as a courtesy. Inside the room was a parade of old money and perfectly whitened smiles. Every chair was filled with someone who knew the Whitfields, former colleagues of my father, board members from Lyle's hospital, Darlene's polished law partners. They shook hands with purpose and laughed like they were all in on something. I found my seat, near the end of the long table, far from the head where my father sat like a general at a victory banquet. My place card read, Miss A. Whitford, not even my real last name. I blinked, smiled, and sat down. As the appetizers made their rounds, so did the wine. The laughter, the small talk, the well-rehearsed anecdotes. They floated by like a current I had no desire to swim in. I listened, nodded when expected, laughed quietly when appropriate. I knew this rhythm. I'd learned how to move in it without leaving a ripple. The main toast began. Russell stood, cleared his throat with the authority of a man used to being heard. 68 years, he began, raising his glass. Not bad for a guy who spent half his life elbow-deep in hearts. Laughter, predictable, polite. I've had the privilege of working with some of the finest minds in medicine, but nothing, and I mean nothing, makes me prouder than watching my son carry the torch. He turned to Lyle, who wore the expression of someone used to being applauded. Your latest publication? It proves what I've always known. You're not just following in my footsteps, you're widening the path. A wave of claps rolled down the table. I raised my glass, the smile on my lips barely touching my eyes. Actually, I started gently, MediSync's recent data integrations. Russell cut in before I finished. Let's not turn this into a TED Talk, honey. Laughter again. Awkward this time. I caught one guest wincing before quickly taking a sip of water. I nodded. Of course. It wasn't the first time my voice was clipped mid-sentence, like an overgrown hedge. It wouldn't be the last. But I never gave them the satisfaction of seeing the sting. I once heard someone say, you can't wait for people to see your worth. Sometimes you have to move in silence and let your work speak. I didn't remember who said it, but it had stuck with me, like a mantra, like armor. After dessert, Darlene, still glowing from compliments about the cake she hadn't baked, lifted her glass again. And let's not forget, she chirped, we'd be completely tech-blind without Aileen fixing the printer last week. The table erupted in laughter. She practically disassembled it in the office hallway, someone added. It's true, Darlene beamed. She's our in-house genius, at least when the IT guy doesn't show up. More laughter. I smiled. A still one. The kind you make when you realize you've been cast as comic relief in a story you were never asked to write. Across the table, Janelle, Lyle's fiancée, watched me with a look I couldn't quite place. Curiosity? Confusion? Pity? She didn't say anything, but she didn't laugh either. I excused myself from the table under the pretense of a phone call. In truth, I needed a second. Away from the spotlight that never pointed in my direction. The restroom was empty. I stood by the mirror, fingers curling tightly around the marble edge of the sink. Let them laugh, I thought. let them make jokes about printers and TED Talks and mistaken surnames. The day was coming when the joke wouldn't be on me. The day was coming when they'd have no choice but to listen. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I glanced down. From Horizon Health Tech subject, acquisition proposal, Medisync draft term sheet. I didn't blink. I just stared at the screen until the words burned into my mind. Then I slid the phone back into my bag and adjusted my lipstick in the mirror. I walked back to the table the way I'd entered, poised, unreadable, and I knew, right then, this birthday wouldn't be remembered for the cake. The laughter hadn't changed. Same cadence, same rehearsed warmth. As I walked back to the dinner table, they were mid-sentence in one of Lyle's exaggerated med school stories. Something about a patient mistaking him for a TV doctor. The table roared, and my empty chair waited quietly at the end of the row, still marked Whitford. I didn't fix it. That wasn't the kind of thing you corrected without making it worse. I sat, folding my napkin over my lap, just as a server placed my entree. My father glanced at me, but said nothing. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking to be included anymore. Something had shifted. I wasn't there to participate, I was there to witness. There's a difference. Darlene clinked her glass with her spoon and stood. Before we move to dessert, she beamed, we have a little surprise. The lights dimmed. A projector flickered on, displaying a slideshow titled The Whitfield Legacy. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't move. Soft piano music played under a reel of Lyle's baby pictures, his high school valedictorian speech, medical school graduation, charity awards, headshots. Darlene was in most of them, smiling as if she had built the boy herself. There were even clips of my father on stage, shaking hands with hospital donors. Not a single image of me, not in the background, not even as a kid, like I never existed. No one said anything, but I saw the shift in a few expressions, subtle, embarrassed. A couple of Darlene's friends exchanged glances. Still, no one stopped the show. No one asked, "Where's Aileen?" I watched every second without blinking. When the lights came up, I picked up my water and took a long sip. You'd think I was adopted, I thought, or worse, edited out like a flaw. I felt something tug on my elbow. I looked down. My niece, maybe 5, wearing a pink bow and grape juice on her dress, smiled up at me. "Auntie Aileen?" she asked. "Do you work at my daycare?" I blinked. "No, honey, I don't." Before I could say more, Darlene, who had caught the exchange, laughed a little too loudly. "No, sweetie," she said. "She helps with computer stuff sometimes." Someone at the table snorted. "Oh, right, the tech one." Another voice, soft but not quiet enough, whispered to Janelle, "Isn't she like the IT sister?" Janelle didn't respond, but she didn't laugh either. She was watching me again, really watching. Not with pity, just curiosity. Like she was trying to piece something together that didn't match the image she'd been fed. I let the conversation drift around me. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I'd done that before, explaining Medisync, the hospitals, the funding rounds, and all it got me was silence and polite smiles. So I let them talk. Inside, something braced. Something began cataloging the evening. Who laughed? Who stayed quiet? Who glanced away? I wasn't invisible. I was being erased. There's a difference. And when people erase you gently, you almost feel guilty for noticing. As if your presence is the problem, not their blindness. I thought of a line Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." I knew that agony intimately. I carried it in my teeth, behind every restrained smile. That night, instead of withdrawing, I sharpened. I studied the room like a chessboard. No more playing the pawn. Janelle leaned toward me once, about to speak, then pulled back. She looked unsettled. Let her wonder, I thought. As coffee was served, my phone vibrated in my bag. I pulled it out under the table, from Horizon Health Tech subject. Follow-up. Strategic alignment inquiry. Are you available for a meeting next week? I didn't smile, not visibly, but something uncoiled in my chest. I set the phone face down beside my plate. I looked across the table at my father, still beaming under the weight of his own mythology. And I knew, the next time I sat at a table like this, it would have my name on the banner and theirs on the deal. After the dinner, I didn't sleep. I walked home from the restaurant in a steady rhythm, one foot in front of the other, not really feeling the concrete beneath my heels. My thoughts were louder than the city. They always were, after a night like that. Back at my apartment, I didn't even take off my coat. I went straight to the hallway closet, pulled out the storage bin I hadn't opened in years. It was heavier than I remembered. Dust stuck to my palms as I dug through old notebooks, receipts, name badges from conferences where no one remembered my name. Then I saw it. A cracked leather-bound notebook with the words Ideas Junior Year scribbled across the front in fading silver ink. I sat on the floor and opened it slowly. Inside were the first rough diagrams of MediSync, the wireframes, the communication logic flow between departments, sketches on how to create safeguards so that patient information couldn't get lost between labs, nurses, and surgeons. That year, I showed the designs to my father, before it had a name, before it was real. He had skimmed the first few pages, then closed the book and said, "You're not an engineer, Aileen. You're just a problem solver with no domain." At the time, I didn't cry. I just placed the notebook in the family study bookshelf, somewhere safe. But 2 years later, while helping Darlene clean out the garage, I found that same notebook in a box labeled Donate Scrap. No note, no mention. Just tossed in with some old newspapers and expired ink cartridges. That was the moment I stopped asking them to believe in me. It wasn't that they didn't see me, they did. And they decided I wasn't worth keeping. I scanned the pages now, my own handwriting looking foreign and sharp. I placed the notebook on my desk, opened my laptop, and carefully photographed each page. I saved them to a new folder labeled IP MediSync Origin. As I uploaded the files, my inbox pinged. Another email from Horizon. We'd like to see early documents or visuals that establish your technical authorship. They weren't just talking funding anymore. They were asking about rights. I was still staring at the email when another memory surfaced, one I hadn't revisited in years. Lyle had asked me to help him prepare a slide deck for a hospital presentation, something about innovation in patient management systems. He said it was casual, said I was the only one who could make the interface look like it actually made sense. I'd stayed up 2 nights fixing the back-end demo, formatting the citations, smoothing out animations in PowerPoint. He didn't thank me, but I didn't ask him to. On the day of the event, I sat in the back of the conference hall. Quiet. Proud, maybe. And then he got on stage. "This is a collaborative effort," he told the audience, "between my med team and some freelance engineers." Freelance engineers. Not my sister, not Aileen, not even a name. I felt heat climb up my spine, but I didn't move. I watched the doctors nod, the board members scribble notes. They clapped when he showed the patient interface, an early version of what would become MediSync's framework. Something I'd helped build from scratch. I left that room with a familiar ache. Not devastation, just confirmation. It wasn't that they didn't know who I was. It was that they thought no one else would. My fingers hovered over the keyboard now, tracing the outline of the send button. Horizon didn't need a dramatic story. They needed proof, and I had it. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about authorship, about saying, I was here, I built this. You don't get to sign my work and erase my name. I attached the PDF of scanned sketches, renamed it MediSync Case Founder Proof.pdf, and hit send. Not a minute later, another email arrived. We'd like to confirm the identity of the original patent contributor. Can you verify? My fingers didn't hesitate this time. I wasn't just going to verify it. I was going to make them say it, out loud, in front of everyone. The charity dinner was held at one of those marble and glass venues with too much light and not enough warmth. I arrived early, not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to see what they had planned without me. That had become a habit over the years, showing up early to watch my own erasure unfold. Inside, waitstaff buzzed around setting plates and polishing glasses. I scanned the table chart. My name was there, sort of. Miss A. Whitford. Close enough to be lazy, far enough to be intentional. I didn't correct it. My seat was near the back, grouped with a few IT consultants and event contractors. Far from the head table where Lyle, Darlene, and Russell would hold court, basking in institutional approval. I walked to my place, nodded at a few familiar faces. One of the AV guys gave me a quick fist bump and said, "You're on tech backup tonight?" I didn't answer. I just smiled like it was the right joke to make. By the time the guests filled in, the air was humming with boardroom small talk and quiet networking. I listened, but I didn't join. I wasn't there to belong. I was there to see who still believed I didn't. The MC stepped up, mic in hand. "We'd like to welcome all our wonderful guests tonight, including a few from the behind-the-scenes magic, like our tech support team, always holding us together." Laughter rolled through the room. A few glances landed on my table. I caught one, just one, land on me. I smiled again. It's easier than fighting every line. After the introduction, I stood to refill my water. Darlene passed by and leaned down. "Don't take it personal, honey," she whispered. "They probably thought you were helping backstage like always." I didn't flinch. "Of course," I replied. "That's what I'm good at, filling in the gaps." Her laugh was light, like she didn't hear the bitterness in my tone. Back at the head table, Lyle began a short speech during the main course. He spoke about innovation, his department's recent rollout of a new patient communication interface, inspired by conversations within our own family. I froze. His phrasing was nearly word for word from a memo I'd written 2 years ago, something he'd dismissed at the time as too technical for patients. I stood mid-toast and walked out. No excuse, no explanation, just air. The hallway was cold, quiet, a corridor of silence I'd walked too many times before. A voice called my name from behind. I turned. It was Alex, an old colleague from a startup conference. He smiled, confused. "They didn't list you as the event organizer. You put this together, didn't you?" I gave a small nod. He shook his head. "Typical. You ghost build everything and never get credited." Later, back inside, Russell gave the closing thanks. "To everyone who made this night possible, thank you, especially Lyle, Darlene, the board, and our incredible planning team." My name didn't come up, not once. It wasn't forgetfulness, it was precision. I sat back down, legs crossed, spine tall. I took a slow breath, then looked around. One by one. Who spoke my name? Who avoided my eyes? Who claimed the credit when the applause started? Janelle glanced over. Her face was unreadable, alert, maybe even cautious. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away either. I didn't need to speak. I took my inventory in silence. The names I used to defend, the ones who edited me out with practiced hands. Under the table, my phone buzzed. From Horizon Legal Subject, Signature Request, IP Attribution. "We're preparing documents. Can you verify primary contributor status?" I didn't answer right away. I raised my eyes across the table, to my father. He was laughing, fork mid-air, still basking in praise that didn't belong to him. If they were going to erase me again, I was going to make sure it cost them something this time. There's a particular kind of silence that follows betrayal. Not loud, not messy, just hollow. That was the sound in my head when I pulled up to the family estate in Evanston. The sun was just beginning to dip below the trees lining the driveway, and the house looked exactly as it always had, immaculate, polished, and curated to appear warmer than it ever felt. Inside, the informal legacy session was already in motion. I'd been told to arrive by 6 p.m., But the discussion had clearly started without me. Lyle was mid-sentence, seated comfortably beside Russell at the long dining table, a stack of documents in front of him. "Ah, there she is," Darlene said as I stepped into the room. "We were just getting to the charity allocations." No one offered me a seat. I pulled out a chair quietly at the end of the table. There were packets laid out, heavy paper, bound, branded. I flipped mine open. My name appeared once. A footnote. "Discretionary allocation," it read. No titles, no recognition of my contributions to the family's assets, to Medisync. Lyle, meanwhile, was listed as primary inheritor and executor of medical innovations. A neat little ribbon around his entire existence. Russell cleared his throat. "We've had to make some difficult decisions, Aileen. You've chosen an unpredictable path. This allows the family to move forward with continuity." I stared at the words on the page a second longer. Then I closed the packet, slid it into my bag, and said nothing. There's a point where fighting for a seat at the table becomes begging to be fed. I'd passed that point long ago. Later that night, back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat in the dark. The lights from the city lit the edges of the room, but I didn't reach for the switch. I opened my laptop instead. A new Google alert had arrived. Whitfield Technologies announces major milestone in hospital interface solutions. Below the headline was a photo, Lyle, grinning, shaking hands with a hospital administrator. I clicked. The article described a software interface, one I recognized down to the font and layout. My interface, the same system I diagrammed, tested, and debugged. Only now it belonged to Whitfield Technologies. The byline credited the interface to Vivian Whitford, technical associate. They'd butchered my name. Again. I emailed the publisher, attached documentation, requested a correction, no reply. I didn't bother sending a second message. Instead, I opened my cloud archive. Medisync Genesis, ownership verification. I added a new subfolder. Legal track. Scanned copies of early designs, presentation decks, email threads, everything Olivia and I had built from scratch. I uploaded a new version of the original prototype video, the one with our voices, our faces, our names. A notification appeared in the corner of the screen. From Horizon Health Tech subject, in-person pitch, tentative scheduling. I stared at it, then clicked confirm. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. Aileen, remember when they said this wouldn't matter? You still got that video? Olivia, always. Why? I smiled. Not for revenge, not even for justice. Because now, I wasn't just preparing to speak. I was preparing to show them everything they chose not to see. The ballroom pulsed with industry polish. Glass chandeliers, minimalist flower arrangements, and a buffet no one touched, because handshakes were the true currency. I walked through the lobby of the tech summit with practiced ease, wearing the kind of dress that made people forget they'd overlooked you a dozen times before. Inside the main hall, the evening's program lay neatly folded on each chair. Panelists, honorees. Whitfield Innovations was printed in bold under the headline, Family-Led Medical Breakthroughs. My name wasn't anywhere on the page. I scanned the room. Russell stood near the front row, laughing with two men from the regional hospital network. Lyle hovered by the stage, checking his reflection in a pitcher of water. I took my seat in the third row. Not front, not back. Close enough to hear everything, far enough not to be noticed. As the panel began, my stomach stayed still, but my fingers gripped the armrest like it might break loose from the chair. Lyle was introduced first. The mind behind the integration of Medisync into real hospital systems, the moderator said. Lyle smiled modestly, the way a man does when he's used to praise. It wasn't just about systems, he began. It was about humanizing data, about making patient communication seamless. Those were my words, word for word from the pitch I gave during my senior year, before I'd even formed the company, before Lyle had decided tech was worth looking into. He finished his segment with a line that was once scribbled in my college notebook. "We don't just code, we connect." Applause. I didn't move. After the session, while attendees mingled near the stage, I stepped into the hallway. Cool air bit at my cheeks as I stood alone by the elevator bank. I didn't have to search for Lyle. He came to me. "Hey," he said, tone casual. "Didn't expect to see you here?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Next time you use my words," I said, "spell my name right." He blinked, thrown off balance. Before he could recover, I turned and walked away. I didn't need a scene. I needed the truth to feel heavier than the applause he'd stolen. That night, in my apartment, I uploaded the original code for MediSync, the one Olivia and I had built in the Northeastern lab when we still ate ramen and dreamed in whiteboard diagrams. Olivia had kept the time-stamped repository, just like she'd promised. I forwarded it to Horizon's legal team, along with early drafts of our UI designs and internal documentation. In the subject line, I wrote, "For internal review, founder attribution." I didn't wait for a response. I closed the laptop, leaned back on the couch, and let the quiet settle over me like armor. The next morning, the reply was waiting. "We've reviewed your submission. Internal verification required. Please prepare for the strategic in-person meeting." I scanned the date. It was the same night as Lyle and Janelle's engagement dinner. I didn't flinch. I took a sip of coffee, let the bitterness fill my mouth. Maybe it was poetic, maybe it was coincidence, but if they weren't going to give me a seat at the table, then I'd turn the whole table upside down. The email came at 9:14 a.m., just as I was stepping out of the elevator, with a lukewarm coffee and a to-do list longer than I'd slept the night before. Subject line, "Final engagement dinner agenda." I scrolled quickly, half expecting another list of speakers I wasn't on. And there it was, in black and white. Support staff, A. Whitford. Support. I stared at the screen, blinking once. That evening, I called Janelle's assistant under the pretense of checking logistics. She confirmed it smoothly. "No, unfortunately, you're not scheduled for the family welcome remarks. Just Lyle and the parents. It's tight, you know? Only the central names." Only the central names. I didn't correct her. Not because I agreed, but because I'd learned the power of withholding your correction. Let people dig their own holes. 2 days before the event, Darlene and Russell issued a press release. Whitfield Health Tech announces partnership to modernize hospital communication. I read it twice. The logo at the bottom was MediSync's, tweaked just enough to avoid being an exact match. The corners were softened, the tagline was different, but the framework? Mine. All of it. I forwarded it to Horizon's legal team with one line. "See attached. This is what rebranding theft looks like." They responded within an hour. "Noted. Will be addressed at your in-person presentation." I sat in my kitchen, rereading the press release as if it were a eulogy for a legacy they tried to bury. They hadn't just stolen my name. They'd taken the shape of something I built and pasted their initials on it like stickers on a stolen laptop. They tried to rebrand my legacy before I finished building it, I said aloud. And not for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt focused. The night of the dinner, I arrived precisely at 6:55 p.m., 5 minutes early, just late enough not to be recruited into last-minute seating adjustments, just early enough to watch who took credit for the setup. The ballroom shimmered in soft gold tones. Darlene floated through the room like a socialite on a campaign trail. And wrapped around her neck was a white silk scarf embroidered delicately with the logo, Whitfield Health Tech. A woman next to her admired it, fingers brushing the edge. "That's stunning. Is it custom?" Darlene smiled with ease. "It's from our new line, Family Initiative. Lyle's the visionary." I was standing a few feet away, sipping sparkling water. No one noticed. I didn't interrupt, didn't flash credentials, didn't scream into the void. I simply watched. Janelle stood near the back, talking to a Horizon board member, but her eyes kept drifting to me, sharp, curious, like she was putting together a puzzle someone had warned her never to finish. I left early. Back at my apartment, I powered up my laptop and opened my pitch folder. Slide 1, logo timeline, original sketches, followed by each distorted iteration they'd tried to co-opt. Slide 2, user growth. Slide 3, media mentions and funding rounds. I attached Horizon's previous request for attribution proof and included timestamped documentation from the first code build Olivia and I ever deployed. Then, I renamed the folder. Their name, my proof. I sat back, breathing in slowly. This wasn't just about one dinner or one document. This was about the architecture of power. The calculated elegance with which they'd tried to replace my fingerprint with their watermark. Tomorrow, I'd speak. And for the first time in a very long time, they would listen. I arrived at the Blue Ridge restaurant 5 minutes early. Not too soon to seem overeager, not too late to appear dismissive. The timing was intentional. So was everything I wore. Subtle, polished, pointed. The dress wasn't for the family. It was for the table they always said I didn't belong at. The hostess led me through a sea of glittering glass and quiet wealth to a seat far from the center. I was placed near the end of the long U-shaped arrangement, next to second cousins, who barely remembered my name, and a family friend who once asked if I still helped with email stuff. It didn't matter. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to be impossible to ignore. Russell was already seated with Darlene, flanked by Lyle and Janelle, who looked radiant in that effortless Upper Lakeview way. Across from them sat Janelle's parents and, surprisingly, a Horizon board member. I caught his presence in the corner of my eye, noted it, and said nothing. Dinner began with small talk and plated appetizers that looked more like decorations than food. Then came the second course, roasted duck with some citrus glaze no one could pronounce. And that's when it happened. Janelle tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing across the table. "Wait, Whitfield?" she said, setting down her fork. "Your last name's Whitfield?" I looked up, calmly. She blinked. "Hold on. Are you the Vivian Whitfield from our Medisync acquisition files?" The silence was immediate and clean. Knives paused mid-cut. Conversations froze. I set my napkin down slowly. "I am." Russell's laugh was too quick. "There must be a mistake. My daughter doesn't own Medisync." "She's the co-founder," Janelle said, eyes locked on me. "Her name's on the patent." Gasps aren't always loud. Sometimes they're just breaths drawn too sharply. Darlene's hand gripped her wine glass tighter. Lyle stared straight ahead, as if trying to blink himself invisible. I let it sit. Let it marinate in the space where I'd always been silent. "We built the first version in Olivia's garage," I said, voice steady. "It's now in 127 hospitals. Horizon's offer came through me." I watched as the Horizon board member leaned forward slightly, interested now in a way that hadn't been on his face before. "You're the silent partner?" he asked. I turned to him. "The real one?" Lyle cleared his throat, but no sound followed. Russell looked like he'd just realized he'd misplaced a decade. Distant relatives began whispering, their mouths hidden behind napkins. An uncle, one I barely spoke to, lifted his glass awkwardly. "Well, here's to the real legacy," he muttered. I didn't toast. I didn't smile. I sipped my wine. Darlene tried to salvage the moment. "We've always supported Aileen's projects." "You supported the idea of me," I replied, not raising my voice, "but never the reality." The table quieted again. I wasn't angry. I was done. I turned toward Janelle. "If your team still wants to proceed," I said, "my lawyers are ready." She looked down for a beat, then nodded. There was no smile, just understanding. Business had been separated from blood in a single sentence. Russell opened his mouth, maybe to defend, maybe to deflect. I stood, gathered my clutch, and raised a hand. Not to silence him, but to stop the lie I knew was forming behind his teeth. "You said enough," I told him, "when you said nothing." And the silence they always forced on me became the loudest thing in the room. The morning after the engagement dinner, my phone was bloated with missed calls and unread texts. 17 from Darlene, 8 from Russell, 2 from Lyle, one of which was just, "Can we talk?" Janelle's name blinked once on the screen with a message. "I didn't know. Can we meet?" I didn't open any of them. Chicago looked the same outside my apartment window. Same skyline, same streaks of sunlight bending off Lake Michigan. But something inside me had shifted. Not a crack, a clean break. I needed coffee, badly. The cafe on my block was still half empty, its regulars nestled in with their laptops and half-finished novels. I ordered black, no room for cream. As I waited, a voice behind me said, "Hey, Aileen, right?" I turned. It was Dean, some cousin I only saw at reunions and funerals. "You were at the dinner last night," he said, awkwardly trying to sound casual. "That was something." I nodded, reaching for my drink. He grinned. "So, you still doing that help desk thing?" My fingers tightened slightly on the cup. I looked at him, slow and direct. "CEO," I said, handing him a business card. "MediSync, look it up." He blinked, took the card, then gave me the kind of laugh people make when they realize they've said the wrong thing, but don't know how to apologize for it. I walked out before he could find the words. Back at home, I curled onto the corner of the couch and opened my laptop. Notifications blinked in the corner. Articles, alerts, a few LinkedIn pings. I ignored them all. It wasn't ignorance anymore. That excuse had expired. This was willful blindness, a stubborn refusal to admit the girl they once dismissed had built something they couldn't. I thought of all the times I bit my tongue, dimmed my light so theirs could shine. I hadn't lost my voice. I handed it to them in pieces over years. And they'd taken it, turned it into a story that fit their names better. A new text came in. Lyle. It was never personal. You were just doing your thing. We thought you'd circle back. Circle back. I remembered the day I showed him the module, the core of the platform he now bragged about on stage. He'd looked at my sketches like they were fridge drawings. "This is a cool little project," he said. I'd nodded then. I didn't reply now. I deleted the message. Some silences are hollow, others are deliberate. I clicked into my cloud archive and dragged one more file into my folder. The original MediSync prototype video, recorded in my college lab, with Olivia narrating and me at the console, walking through every function. I didn't edit it. I didn't add commentary. I uploaded it directly to Horizon's secure portal. No caption, no footnotes. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. My attorney's name lit up the screen. "They want to meet," he said. "Not just legal, executive level." I didn't flinch. "Let's schedule it," I said, already opening my calendar. If they were finally ready to listen, I had more than just my voice this time. I had proof. I arrived at Horizon Health Tech headquarters, wearing the quiet kind of confidence I once mistook for arrogance in others. The kind that didn't need heels higher than reason, or a blazer sharp enough to cut through doubt. Just truth. Documented, time-stamped, undeniable. The receptionist greeted me by name, correctly, and guided me through glass corridors that mirrored more than just reflections. Each step toward the conference room was measured, but not hesitant. I'd already walked longer paths through louder silences. Inside, a sleek table stretched across the room, flanked by legal counsel, Horizon's CEO, and a few quiet executives whose expressions were unreadable. Janelle sat near the end, lips tight, eyes already full of apology. She didn't speak, smart move. Then I saw them, Russell and Lyle, sitting at the far end, too polished, too rehearsed. I hadn't been told they'd be here. That didn't surprise me. They were always better at being invited than being included. I didn't greet them. I shook hands with Horizon's counsel and took my seat at the opposite end. Before the meeting began, I opened my folder, slid a printed email across the table. It was from one of Janelle's junior team members, dated early in the acquisition talks. Wait, MediSync's founder is a woman? Silence followed the sentence again, just like it had the first time. I tapped the paper gently. That was the beginning of this conversation, I said evenly. Let me show you how it ends. I pulled out my laptop, connected to the projector, and clicked play. The video showed my 20-something self in a borrowed college lab, hair tied back, walking through MediSync's first interface. Olivia's voice narrated. My code ran live on screen. Our names were in the corner, clear, present, real. No one interrupted. When it ended, I walked them through the roadmap. From sketches to seed funding, from the first small hospital to nationwide expansion. I listed the partners, the pilot failures, the refinements. I showed every slide like a surgeon wielding truth instead of a scalpel. Lyle cleared his throat. I didn't look at him. Russell leaned forward slightly, hands folded like a priest in confession. The family's always tried to support innovation, he began. You have to understand. I'm not your legacy, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm your lesson. He closed his mouth. Then came the second clip. A hospital awards dinner. Lyle on stage, my software demo on the projector. My name, nowhere. The Horizon CEO leaned back, nodded once, and said, We believe we have all the clarity we need. I didn't smile. I simply turned to the contract waiting at the end of the table. They signed it, directly with me. Lyle and Russell weren't listed, not even in advisory roles. Janelle, to her credit, didn't make excuses. She signed as witness and didn't meet my eyes until it was done. When it was over, I stood. No handshake, no farewell. As I exited, my phone buzzed. Whitfield Health Tech, PR inquiry. Please comment on your role in MediSync. I didn't respond, not yet. Because this time, they'd have to say my name first, and they'd have to get it right. The brunch at the Drake was set up like a press event. White tablecloths, stemmed glasses, and the kind of nervous formality that made you feel more like a keynote speaker than a daughter. I spotted the single tulip placed in front of my seat, right between Darlene and Russell. It wasn't a warm gesture. It was decorative, like everything they did. They stood as I approached, a little too quickly, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to hug me or just smile. They went with the smile. Russell straightened his napkin. We've read everything, he said, his voice pitched somewhere between pride and performance. We're proud of you, always have been. I let the words sit on the table for a moment. No, I said, folding my hands. You were proud of an idea of me. You loved the version you imagined, quiet, supportive, undefined. But every time I stepped outside that outline, you tried to pull me back into it. Darlene leaned in slightly, her voice soft but defensive. We didn't understand how big it was. We thought you were still figuring yourself out. I looked at her directly. And when I did figure it out, you erased it. Silence. The kind that fills a room not because there's nothing to say, but because what was said can't be undone. I took a sip of water, let the glass clink gently back onto the table. I thought about how often I had tried to get here, to this exact moment, where I could speak plainly and be understood. But now that I was here, I realized I didn't need understanding. I needed the truth to be spoken out loud. Healing doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it comes with recognition of who you are, of who they are, and of the space between those things that will never be crossed again. Love without respect, I said, isn't love. It's control in a nicer suit. Darlene blinked slowly. Do you forgive us? I paused, not because I needed time to think, but because I wanted them to hear the difference in my answer. I don't carry resentment, I said. I carry clarity. You never saw me. And now I know I never needed you to. Russell reached across the table, placed his hand over mine. I didn't pull away, but I didn't grip back. He smiled sadly, like a man who just realized the cost of being right for too long. When the check came, I waved the server and paid for my own meal. They didn't stop me. Outside, the city buzzed like any other Sunday. Tourists snapped photos of buildings they didn't recognize. Runners dodged slow walkers. Life moved. I stood at the curb, alone, waiting for a cab. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message from a university in Boston. We'd be honored to have you keynote our STEM Women's Summit next quarter. Your journey is exactly what our students need to hear. I smiled, not because it validated me, but because it didn't have to. As the cab pulled up, I slid in, gave the driver my address, and checked my messages. There was one from Olivia. Aileen, think we're ready to mentor the next round of ghost founders? Olivia, let's make sure none of them ever have to be ghosts again. Because my story wasn't ending with them, it was beginning with those like me. 6 months later, the city skyline shimmered behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of a rooftop venue on Wacker Drive. The air buzzed with something electric, anticipation, or maybe reverence. MediSync's global relaunch was more than an event. It was a reclamation. I walked in with my head high, not out of pride, but because I no longer owed anyone my silence. My name was on every slide, every program, every branded napkin. Aileen Whitfield, head of global innovation. And this time, there was no asterisk. The media hovered by the entrance. Tech reporters, international executives, board members. Olivia was already inside, briefing a panelist near the media booth. She shot me a look across the room, half smirk, half relief. A stagehand handed me a mic. "You're up in 10." I nodded, stepping backstage. Then came a whisper from one of the event coordinators. "Lorene's here." I looked down over the crowd and spotted her in the front row. My aunt. The only person who ever saw me without needing me to prove anything. She looked older, but her posture hadn't changed. Chin lifted, hands folded in the lap of her coat. A memory flashed. Me at 8 years old, in her garage, holding a screwdriver too big for my hand. She'd handed it to me like it was a crown and said, "If they won't build it for you, build it yourself." I took a breath that felt like it belonged to someone finally done holding back. The MC introduced me. I stepped onto the stage to a wave of applause, not for who they thought I might be, but for who I had proven I was. "This isn't just a product launch," I began, voice even. "It's a reclamation." I didn't mention Russell or Lyle or the name they tried to edit me out of. I didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew. I walked through the evolution of MediSync. How it started, what we learned, how it changed lives. I highlighted Olivia's role. I honored the team. And when I closed, I said this: never confuse quiet with weak. Sometimes, silence is just strategy. The room rose. I didn't smile until I stepped off the stage. Later that night, my photo appeared on the homepage of Forbes. From Ghost Founder to Global Force. Horizon emailed to confirm my board seat. They used my full name. No abbreviations, no misprints. Then another email came in, from Russell. "I spoke about you at the hospital today, told them I was your father." I read it, then archived it. An hour later, as the last few guests lingered over drinks and skyline photos, a girl maybe 17 walked up to me. Her school badge said Chicago Public STEM. She hesitated, then said, "My mom always told me women like you don't make it unless someone hands you a chance." I crouched to her level, handed her one of the mentorship cards Olivia and I had printed. "We don't wait for chances," I said. "We build doors no one expects." She held it like it weighed something real. "Join our lab," I added. "We're not ghosts anymore." As the venue cleared out, I stepped to the balcony with a glass of champagne. A news ticker played on the silent screen near the bar. Whitfield Health Tech under review for IP violations. I didn't turn my head. I just smiled. They wrote me out of the story, so I wrote a better one. Because this wasn't a comeback. It was the beginning of an empire. Looking back now, I realized the biggest shift wasn't building MediSync or winning the acquisition. It was deciding I didn't need their permission to exist fully. For years, I let others define my worth, erase my name, and reshape my story. But silence, when chosen, can be a weapon. And reclaiming your voice, quietly, strategically, is its own kind of revolution. To anyone watching this who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, you're not broken. You're just building. And sometimes, the world won't clap until you've already crossed the finish line. So build anyway, speak anyway, write your own legacy, even if you have to do it in the dark first. What's your story? Have you ever been pushed to the sidelines in your own life? What did you do when someone tried to speak over your truth? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your experience, or just drop a 1 if this story resonated with you, even in the smallest way. Let me know what city you're watching from. I want to know who you are. And if you didn't like this video, I want to hear why too. Growth comes from real conversations, even the uncomfortable ones. If this story touched your heart or made you reflect, please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss the next journey. We have more stories coming, raw, human, and honest. Until next time, keep building, even when no one's watching, because one day they will.